PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. Round 1 of the Candidates Tournament saw some surprising openings, intriguing middle games and unexpected finishes. I've got to go with the game between the top two players in the tournament, Fabiano Caruana playing white against Hikaru Nakamura. Such an interesting start. So here we go, Fabiano with white, playing his usual e4. And we've got a Sicilian from Hikaru Nakamura. No e4, e5s, no Berlins. We know that Hikaru is an excellent technical player, but he's going for an open Sicilian. Fascinating stuff. So Najdorf, you might expect, Scheveningen, Dragon. But no, e5. Now, according to my records, not an opening that Hikaru has ever played before. Now, he's played the Najdorf before. He's played the Kalashnikov before. So he's used to playing with a backward d-pawn. But this move, e5, quite an old move actually, doesn't have a very good reputation. So this was the first shock of the tournament actually. What was he doing? Well, the reason that e5 has really been discredited is because of this move. Bishop b5 check. You see, that's why a6 is played in the Najdorf. One of the reasons that a6 is played, to cover the b5 square. And the problem is black doesn't want to exchange off those light squared bishops because that leaves these squares weakened. And knight d7, as Hikaru played, allows knight f5. And this is the problem with this variation. It's quite sticky for black. But Hikaru had clearly prepared this extremely well. And he flashed out his moves while Fabiano was taking his time. And yeah, the databases show that Caruana has only had this once before. I can't believe that. He must have played it before a few more times with white. But still, it shows how rare this variation is. And previously, well, in fact, in an online game last year, Caruana took here and played the knight back. You can see that white has very good control here. But actually, he ended up losing this game. Black fought back very well. Of course, you know, it looks like white is slightly better here, but you can see that actually after this move, bishop e6, this is actually very typical of the Najdorf and also of the Kalashnikov variation, where black plays with a backward d-pawn with this pawn structure. In fact, because of the pressure on d5, black is absolutely fine here. So after this, yeah, there you go, Liberation Station. And I know it's just an online game, but Fabiano ended up losing this position. I mean, this is perfect strategy for black. So it's not as simple as it looks. And in fact, after 9 minutes thought, Fabiano was obviously just kind of orientating himself here. He played the best move, bishop a4. So black has to do something about this pawn, but first of all, b5, driving the bishop back, and then knight c5. If you don't know what you're doing with black in this position, this can be really unpleasant, but Hikaru playing his moves instantly, he'd obviously rehearsed this extremely well. But it's not simple for black. You know, this pin is unpleasant. It means that white is going to get control of the d5 square. And this knight is very strong on f5, so it has to be eliminated. But that's problematic, because once the light squared bishop goes, then white has greater control over d5. Bishop e7, still played instantly by Nakamura. And Caruana exchanged, and he castled. So on each turn, Caruana was really taking his time, just working his way into the position, just making sure that he was familiar with what's going on. I'm sure he's looked at this. He's played, theoretically, one of the best lines for white. But it really doesn't do any harm just to make sure everything's okay, particularly when your opponent is playing instantly. Now, this position has been reached before, and if black plays, let's say, castle's kingside, then white plays knight d5, and this is just a typical positional advantage in the Sicilian, where, yeah, this knight is absolutely beautiful on d5. White can play forever. You're going to play c3. This is a lot of fun, and later on you can try and break with a4, for example. So that's why Hikaru's next move, played fairly quickly, is really important. e4. So he's playing this with his king still in the middle, so it's a little bit risky, but it means that this bishop comes into the game. That's incredibly important. I mean, there's a tactical problem with this, that white can simply take this pawn, and then white recovers the piece. I mean, that's clear. So it's just a little tactic. Rook takes, but now this bishop flies down the diagonal. Rook b1 forced, and the bishop comes back to f6. Right, well, after that transaction, let's just take stock. Material is still even. This bishop on b3 is a superb piece, pointing down f7. This is a constant problem for black. This is why black has to be extremely careful in this position, because at some point white might be able to line up the major pieces in combination with that bishop attacking f7. If black gets tied down to defending that, then it could be really nasty. Then again, this bishop is pretty good. It doesn't have a target yet, but it has a lot of freedom on the diagonal. White's pawns are a little bit ragged, so that makes life a bit more difficult for white. But I think we can see that white has good control over the centre. I think an assessment of slightly better for white is kind of accurate here. But Hikaru, well, I mean, obviously this is part of his preparation. He obviously thought, yes, I'm slightly worse, but it's quite a stable position for black. So he obviously was confident of holding. But it's not easy. Let's see. Now, he started to consume more time around here. So rook c8, queen b7, and Fabi goes in. He realizes he has to take the initiative. If this rook comes up here, and then maybe rook e5 or attacks that pawn, then black has counterplay. Queen b7, so it starts hassling these pawns. Good move. And here Hikaru thought for 34 minutes. Now, the time control is, I think it's 40-2. It's 40-2. And then after the 40th move, they get 30 minutes and an increment of 30 seconds. So in that first time control, after 2 hours, there is no increment. So that's a little bit different to other tournaments. Personally, I like that. I don't like increments in say up to move 40. After that, of course, that's normal. But yeah, to move 40, no increments. So, 34 minutes, that's investing a lot of time. But Caruana invested more time, actually. But now, okay, rook c5, Hikaru looking for counterplay. Queen takes a6, rook takes f5, and rook d1. It's clear that white is better. You can see that all white's pieces are active. Material is even, but white has serious pressure here. It's not just that these pawns are potentially loose. I come back to this problem with f7. This rook is stuck on f8. It's very hard to get it into the game when f7 is so potentially vulnerable. d5 hits the rook, which swung over to b4, so this pawn looks like it's a goner. And Hikaru invested another 20 minutes here and came up with a really intriguing idea. He found bishop c3. It's a very, very clever move. So that pushes white into taking this pawn. And what did he do now? Rook takes f2. Brilliant idea from Hikaru. So he's managed to break through to the king to some extent. Okay, very quickly, what happens if king takes f2? Well, remarkably, just with these two pieces, black can conjure up an attack. So obviously stepping into the e-file doesn't look too good with a rook checking here. So let's say king g1. Then bishop d4 check. That can't be taken by the rook because that's mate. And after bishop e5, black has enough here to draw the game like this, threatening mate on h2. And let's say queen h2 check here. Well, if the king steps over, then actually black is going to win this position. So the king has to step back. And yeah, basically it's a draw. Just goes back and forth here. And so on. Yeah, so this is enough to actually draw the game. If the king comes up, black actually wins with queen h5. It's incredible how, you know, black's queen is so powerful here. And bishop f6 is a wonderful move. As I said, if the king ever steps to the e-file, that's going to be fatal. There is no way out for white in this position. So if king takes f2, it should be a draw. But Hikaru defended extremely well, or counterattacked, or anyway, played the right move. Rook takes pawn. Queen h4, and he brought the queen back to d3. So nice setup of pieces, everything protected. And here's another excellent move from Hikaru, rook f6. So it means if queen takes bishop, then queen check and mate. So this is nice. g3. And the queen swings over to defend the bishop. Well, if you put this position into your computer, you'll see that it thinks that white has a very, very clear advantage. But I tell you what, this one is not easy to play for white. And it's all to do with the king. And this is why I think Hikaru's strategy was very clever. If we could just move a pawn to f2 to cover the king, then yeah, that would be much easier to play. But with a slightly exposed king, this is not simple. And Fabiano was running a little bit short of time around here. Hikaru played the opening very, very quickly. And he had something like 35, 40 minutes left. Whereas Caruana was down to something like 12 or 13 minutes and still had 14 moves to play. So down to about a move a minute. And that's tricky when your king is exposed. Now he played king g2. And okay, it feels very natural to put the king on a light square when, you know, your opponent is sort of playing on the dark squares. Actually, the computer likes rook f1, and it has to be said, it is a logical move, because after this, you know, white is extremely active with these pieces, and the rook potentially coming back down to coming to d7. But after king g2, bishop b2, well, again, white has interesting options here. c4, with potentially pushing that pawn. There's a4, potentially pushing the pawn. It's not easy for black to generate play here. And rook d7, again, is an interesting move. Start to put pressure here, and you never know. Rook f1 could appear again to get through to f7. But Fabiano lost his nerve here, and he played rook f5. And this allowed Nakamura to play this. And the queen and rook are the wrong way round here. If we have a look at this. So f7 is well protected. The king is going to step up to g7. So you can see the difference between the two positions. Black's king is rock solid. White's king, little bit exposed. Now Fabiano pushed this pawn and pushed again. And Hikaru defended excellently here. You know, if this pawn steps to a6, then okay, this could be a bit shaky. Rook a8. Great defensive move. Excellent move from Hikaru. If that's taken, then this is just a draw instantly. And so on. Queen e2. Draw by perpetual check. Obviously, if the king steps back, then the rook can be taken. And this pawn is now in trouble. So rook d5, rook a7. Nice careful move actually. Just defending the 7th rank. And Fabiano can't do much here. Queen d8, another excellent move. Hitting the pawn. Rook d5. Queen c7. h4. I mean, there's nothing really that white can do here. This pawn is dropping. So Fabiano just played h4. Allowed the pawn to be taken. Queen b7. First glance you might think, wow, this looks very serious for black. In fact, Hikaru, who judged this absolutely perfectly. The queen comes back to defend the bishop, so that after the check the king just comes to h6. King is completely safe on h6. And this pawn really, it's pretty irrelevant. It can't advance. Basically, black is always going to have counterplay against the king. So let's have a look at this. King h3, queen e7, and the big point is that these opposite colour bishop endgames in this case are completely drawn. White can't make progress there. Fabiano played queen c4 and then queen e3. Hikaru offered a draw which was accepted. You can see that there's nothing doing here for white. Sooner or later white is going to have to offer an exchange of queens because bishop e5 is coming with pressure here. So, you know, something like queen d3, again, we've got an opposite colour bishop endgame which is completely drawn. And there's simply no way through there. So that was the final position. I thought that was a fascinating struggle. You know, Hikaru's opening was quite a gamble. He realised that he was going to get a slightly worse position here. Fabiano played it pretty well. But he also thought, well, it's fairly stable. I kind of know what sort of position I'm getting and I can fight here. And this was a fantastic idea. Even then, Fabiano was better. But he lost his nerve with rook f5. But he was short of time. So I think just a really intriguing struggle there. I should say that the other three games were also drawn. However, all really interesting games. I think in particular, if I can find the game between Firuzja and Pragnananda, this was, wow, what a struggle. I've just got to take you through one little bit here. Just here from this position. You can see such a tense position with these two rooks of Prague. He took a pawn on f3. This was a hot pawn to take. Knight c5. If that's taken, then there's a huge check on e8. Queen h5. This is amazing stuff. Now, the computer says that this move should be winning for white. Well, okay, I'll leave you to analyse that. Let me just show you the finish, because knight takes e6 looks incredibly strong, White's the exchange down, but rook e8 mate is threatened. But, okay, if you can find black's next move here, congratulations. How did Pragg save himself? This is absolutely brilliant. I'll give you a moment. Knight e5. Wow. What a move. Absolutely brilliant. So if pawn takes knight, black's the exchange up. And pretty safe because the e-file is now blocked. Rook takes e5 was played by Firuzja. And then Pragg was able to give up the rook and force a draw by perpetual check. Or threefold repetition if you want to split hairs. That was an amazing game. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed the round one of the candidates. This is going to be a long tournament. We're going to have so much drama. We certainly had it in that first round. I should say that in the women's candidates tournament, Tan Zhongyi won her game against Ting Jie, so she takes the lead. Very interesting stuff there. I'll try and report on some of the games there later, or well, let's see. Hopefully, there will be some reporting on the channel of that event. Anyway, thanks for watching.